Do you remember a time when you were in so much pain, but then you were dismissed by people around you? This is actually more common than you think, especially for women. Let me tell you a story. It's 2018. My life has been confined to the four walls of my bedroom and the operating theatre. It has been this way for 5 years. I am in a wheelchair and I'm living in constant pain. I've had 6 surgeries, nerve blocks, a double J stent in my urethra, and ultimately a total hysterectomy. That is what it took to get me out of that wheelchair. By that time, my musculoskeletal structure was crooked from being doubled over in pain. This pain that I endured for every single second for more than 5 years defies language. Imagine someone taking a sledgehammer and bludgeoning your stomach repeatedly. But that would not even come close to it. What is the cause of that pain and suffering that reaches the limits of imagination and language? It is endometriosis. This pain is the reality of an estimated 190 million women around the world who live with this debilitating condition. Despite that number, few have heard of it. A survey by Endometriosis UK shows that 62% of women between 16 and 24 years old don't know what it is, and 75% of men of all ages have never heard of it. The official scientific definition of endometriosis is a disease in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. This definition and its offensive simplicity symbolizes society's dismissive attitudes towards women's reproductive health problems. It does this by completely failing to capture the actual suffering women go through, the lived hell, the scale of the reality. Endometriosis, as part of a broader set of women's reproductive health issues, is viewed from a very male-centric lens, even today. People don't like talking about women's reproductive health issues. The uterus, the blood, the pain. These are further complicated by cultural and religious taboos. It is no surprise then that issues such as endometriosis are not taken seriously. This has actually led to disproportionate knock-on effects, such as gender bias in pain management, doctors' attitudes, gender discrimination in hiring practices, all of which are unacceptable. In my case, every second was about surviving to the next second. The pain broke me. It also meant I could not work from 2013 to 2018. 5 years is a long time. My biggest struggle after this ordeal was finding a job. You might have experienced this too, if you have been ill for many years. Hiring managers take issue with the long gap in my CV. The point being, endometriosis ends careers because it is extremely debilitating. As a gender specialist, I have studied these biases and disparities from various lenses: the humanities, sociopolitical, and legal perspectives. They are a result of medicine's own long history of misogyny and discrimination against women. Medicine is not only a science. It is also rooted in culture and a part of society. Therefore, it carries with it all of the biases of that culture and society, in particular, gender bias. This goes back to deeply entrenched gender stereotypes, dating all the way back to Aristotle, Greek historian and philosopher. Greece was the cradle of modern medicine. Aristotle came up with the notion of the great chain of being, a set of hierarchies with God and men right at the top, and women and animals at the bottom, but just above plants and rocks. These hierarchies have fed into psychoanalysis, from Sigmund Freud's theorization that women are mutilated males, resulting in them being hysterical and difficult. In fact, hysteria itself comes from the root word hystera, Greek for uterus, cementing the perceived link between a woman's biology and her very nature as unstable. The Academy of Medical Sciences recently wrote a piece on how the medical profession is failing women. Half the battle is won when a doctor believes you and works with you to tackle endometriosis to have a good quality of life. I am living proof of that. It was the 5th doctor that believed me. Without her, I would not be standing in front of you today. But I had to go through 4 other doctors' dismissal, and that is absolutely unacceptable. There is a dire need for doctors and healthcare professionals to be trained in gender-responsive approaches where endometriosis is concerned. This will have a profound impact on the way they communicate with us without dismissing us and our pain. Let me show you 3 ways through which gender-responsive approaches towards endometriosis can be implemented. Firstly, doctors and healthcare professionals need to put aside their conscious and unconscious biases and take into account the lived realities and experiences of women who have endometriosis. If 190 million men across the world had a similar condition affecting their penises and experienced this level of pain, I am sure people would be talking about it and patients would get a lot more care and respect. Careers would not be lost to endometriosis. Gender biases and stereotypes have meant that we have not been seen as reliable narrators or witnesses of our own experiences with pain and our body. When I begged my doctor, doubled over and crying, to help relieve the pain I was in from endometriosis, I was chided for not getting pregnant. In his eyes, I was just another hysterical woman who did not need pain relief, but needed to have sex. Yes, you heard that right. It was an incredibly disrespectful, belittling, and lonely experience. So deep-rooted are these biases that, in my experience, family and friends can unwittingly perpetuate them too. Overcoming these biases means an inclusive approach where women are recognized as human beings and their well-being and quality of life is centered first and foremost. Unconscious bias training for doctors is the first step in raising awareness of the mental pathways that lead to snap judgments based on gender. Intentional empathy and active listening are crucial components of this. The more these strategies are practiced in unconscious bias training for doctors, the more effective they will be in setting aside preconceived ideas and biases. Secondly, women need to be included in research and healthcare outcomes, both as professionals and as patients. It is a well-known fact, even in the medical community, that women's health conditions attract far less research and funding than all other medical research. In endometriosis, the research is particularly lacking. The numbers that I mentioned earlier are only those that are known and recorded. Unreported numbers mean that in reality, there are way more than 190 million women across the world who live with this debilitating condition. The earliest description of endometriosis dates all the way back to 1860. That was 163 years ago. Yet, in 163 years, we have not been successful in integrating approximately 50% of the global population that is significantly excluded from this enterprise. As long as we keep viewing endometriosis as a purely scientific enterprise, critical knowledge gaps are going to remain that do not take into account the excruciating pain we go through, the financial burdens that we bear, the cost of missed opportunities in life. This actually means going beyond surveys and a tick box exercise. It builds on the unconscious bias training by opening up to lived experience as evidence in medical research. Any research that is not designed with women in mind is going to lead to a system and outcome that does not meet our needs. This also then affects our fundamental human right to health. Thirdly, medicine needs to be taught with its own history and biases in mind. It is not uncommon to hear survivors of endometriosis corroborate that when we complain of pain, we are labeled as mad, psychological, sad, depressed, bad, troublemakers. Indeed, studies have now shown that constructions by clinical professionals of women who have endometriosis portray the pain as psychological. I was told in several instances that my pain is psychosomatic and that exercise will cure it all, that I'm being lazy when I couldn't get out of bed, Endometriosis has become, in Dr. Kate Young's words, the metaphorical meeting point for gender, knowledge, and power. Misogynistic attitudes towards women prevail due to medicine's own historical and cultural baggage, where male bodies and minds have been the norm for reason and logic. Medical education, with an eye towards historical gender biases, will equip healthcare professionals with the knowledge and skills needed to address our diverse needs, while at the same time highlighting discriminating and sexist attitudes that may not be obvious at face value. Society will never be equal until we start giving women's reproductive rights the time, research, and respect that they deserve. Before I leave the stage, I would like to quote a poem by the Canadian Sikh poet Gurpreet Kaur. She writes, "I am not a victim of my life. What I went through pulled a warrior out of me, and it is my greatest honor to be her." Every single endometriosis warrior will identify with these words. I do too. It is indeed my greatest honor to be the warrior I am today. But this warrior should not have to be born at the cost of so much suffering. There is no virtue in suffering so much. So to everyone out there, believe us when we tell you we are in pain. To doctors, I challenge you to put aside any biases. And to all my endo sisters out there, speak your truth, even if your voice shakes.